Hello everyone and welcome to this new episode of 10 Questions About Cloud. Today we have Anahit Pogosova with us. Welcome, Anahit.
Hi, great to be here.
So I always use the first question basically to introduce yourselves. So who you are, what you do.
All right, so I'm a lead cloud software engineer at a company called Solita. And it's a digital transformation company with offices in 6 countries across Europe. And I'm personally based here in Finland. And I'm also a member of AWS Community Builders program, which is a program for AWS enthusiasts and active community members. So that's me.
Cool, really interesting. I'm now curious about your cloud journey. Maybe you can tell us about your first steps toward the cloud, or when was the first time you hear the word cloud itself?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I probably can't remember the first time when I heard the word cloud, but it's been a while ago. But basically, I've been doing full stack development for like over a decade now, and I have done it all like from backend to front end integration. And lately, I got into data engineering, so I have been doing that for the past several years. And of course, I started with the traditional on-prem environments. And at that point, it was pretty common that the servers were actually managed by a third-party company. So we didn't even have access to the servers, and every single change was tedious and slow. And if you needed extra hardware, like extra capacity for your application server or database, it was like waiting for forever, and then migration, and then something went wrong always. So like those good old times, And then around like 5 to 6 years ago, probably, I actually got into cloud, deeper into cloud. Of course, I've heard before that as well, but never went too deep into that. And then at some point, my company suggested actually the possibility to take some online certification courses for AWS. And I went for it and pretty much started pretty modestly with cloud. So started with the certification courses and the hands-on exercises and the labs that they had there. And I pretty much got hooked immediately because it was such a huge difference from what I was used to. And the first time I wrote my first Lambda function that interacted with DynamoDB, it just kind of blew my mind because, it was so simple and everything just scales and everything just works, no servers to set up. It was just like a whole different world for me. So I have been working with AWS pretty much ever since with my customers. And well, I never want to go back to that on-prem days that used to be. So yeah, that's in short my cloud journey so far.
Yeah, I can totally understand that you don't want to go back to the old world, so to say.
Exactly.
Just curious about you're talking a lot about AWS. Are you just focused on AWS, or do you have also experience with other cloud providers?
No, I have been focusing solely on AWS so far. And of course, I've read some things about other cloud providers, but AWS is my main focus so far, at least. All
right. But you already mentioned a lot of advantages of the cloud. If you just can kind of choose one or two advantages, which one will you choose?
You're asking difficult questions, or you are phrasing them in difficult ways because it's so hard to choose.
I know.
There is just like so many of them, like compared to the on-prem world. And again, when I remember this headache of, for example, scaling a database, if you have ever done that with all the headache that goes to that, and then you find out that there is this alternative world where you don't actually need to do that. And when I first kind of figured out that you can scale an SQL database on AWS with just a few clicks or a few API calls, it was just like unbelievable at that point. It was such a huge difference. And I remember like the first question I had was like, do people know about it? Like, why doesn't everybody use that? It was kind of such a huge difference for me. But jokes aside, I think what cloud gave us is that something that was very expensive and maybe available only for bigger companies or maybe enterprises, now all of a sudden is available for everybody, like individuals or small startups. They just can spin up servers, for example, databases or whatever they want to, and they kind of don't need to pay upfront for that. And you don't pay for maintaining those servers or things like that. the security comes out of the box pretty much, which you should have implemented yourself before that. And if you go one step further and you start using serverless, well, then you don't even have to pay for what you don't use. And pretty much you probably will not pay anything until you get to the scale, well, where you start paying, and it gives you kind of a head start, the ability to gain that speed before you actually spend any money, which is just like excellent. So kind of it provided such an extra boost and extra fuel for all this tech innovation that we have been seeing during the past years, with machine learning and big data and IoT. I mean, all these use cases, they were possible only for like huge companies that had a lot of money to kind of invest in those servers and things like that. And then if you think like more exotic things like quantum computing, which was like a sci-fi like a few years ago, and we are going to the direction of like having it on demand in the near future. So like one big thing is making all these things accessible, I guess. And then of course, there is the side of the scalability and durability that comes pretty much out of the box with the cloud, and all this global distribution and replication and built-in security with, like in the case of AWS, it's VPC and IAM, which is pretty much integrated through and through the entire cloud. So those things that kind of help you get starting and get building. And then I think the idea of kind of building blocks and tools that you can use to combine the way you want to and to create really complex architectures, but you don't have to start with a complex architecture. You don't have to pay upfront. You don't have to plan upfront. You kind of start with this simple architecture that works, and then you can extend on top of that. So things like microservices and event-driven architectures, I think they were made possible pretty much by the cloud. So like huge advantages and the things that we are pretty much used to nowadays. But then when you look back like 10 years ago, the world was completely different back then. So.
Yeah, really interesting what you are talking about. The reason why I ask you this question is because it's really funny, because depending on the background or on the company that the speaker is kind of working on, the answer is really different, because one says the cost optimization and the pricing reduction, others says, I don't know, the innovation and the containerization. So it's really interesting to hear different opinions and from different, let's say, backgrounds.
Sure, and I think it really depends a lot on, for example, what you are doing with the cloud. So are you a developer or are you more like of a business person or whatever? And then what kind of a prior background? So do you have something to compare with, to know the good when you see it, so to speak? So it's kind of, I can imagine that the answers would be pretty different for different people.
Yeah, they are. Anyways, the cloud ecosystem, you already mentioned a lot of them, is very, very broad. You can talk about computing, machine learning, serverless, databases, IoT. I know it's incredibly big topic, but what's your focus? What's your, I don't know, what are you more interested in?
Right, so first I have been focused lately on data technologies. So for the past several years. So I have been working with data streaming, for example, with the Kinesis family on AWS. So that's been a big focus for me. Then the data warehouse and data lake solutions like Redshift, S3, Glue, Redshift Spectrum, Athena, all that kind of services. Then, of course, various databases like RDS and our Aurora database and like for the SQL database and then NoSQL databases with DynamoDB. And as I mentioned several times, probably by now, I'm really into serverless, like everything serverless, fully managed services. So I have been focusing on those as well. So integration services, orchestration with step functions, and of course, Lambda and how it kind of integrates and interacts with other services, how you can combine all those pieces together, to make something bigger and better, and like possible architectural patterns and so on. So that has been my main focus.
One question that it just came into my mind is, in case anyone haven't heard the word serverless anytime, which I kind of don't think so, but just in case, how would you define serverless? Because it's not that there are no servers, but
no, of course, servers are always there. It's kind of exactly. A misleading term, but there are, I guess, several definitions of that. What pops to my mind at the moment is that you pay as you go, so you don't need to provision servers. So you pay for what you use. The scaling, like it comes out of the box. What else? So you don't even have access to the servers behind, so they are fully managed, and you don't need to take care of patching, and maintaining and that kind of things. So yeah, those probably are the most important aspects of serverless. So it's a broad term, and there is a lot of services that can be argued to be either serverless or almost serverless. But I guess what first comes to mind when people speak about serverless is the Lambda function, but it's kind of so much more than that. It's kind of a mindset more than one specific service, So yeah, maybe better answer would be that serverless is a mindset.
Yeah, kind of. It's basically focus on your code, and
exactly.
The provider will focus on the rest. So
exactly. So that's the dream world of every developer. So you don't want to think about what's running your code and what's happening behind. You just want to focus on the business logic and kind of deliver that kind of value instead of focusing constantly on what is happening in the background, And yeah, the scaling is one huge aspect of that, because that's probably one of the most difficult things to handle, like to have the capacity to scale, but not to pay for it, without using it. So that kind of things.
Yeah. Just changing a little bit the topic, but I've been kind of involved in different discussions talking about managed services and serverless versus trying to use containers and cloud agnostic solutions. What's your opinion about all of this?
There's a lot of discussions about that lately, and maybe because the serverless is becoming more mainstream than it used to be. And yeah, as you said, it's usually the discussion of either going all in, or so-called like vendor locking, or going in with one cloud provider, or then you are trying to develop a software that is cloud agnostic, which you can move from one cloud to the other if the need arises. But so kind of it's a very common discussion that people are having. But what I think about is that I think cloud nowadays is so much more than just, virtual machines that you kind of can use. It really kind of provides you, if you want to use the full potential of the cloud, you really need to use the services that were built for that cloud, so cloud native services and fully managed services. Like, for example, in case of AWS, it's DynamoDB and all these application integration services and streams, then security features that the cloud provides to you. And in my opinion, if you are not using all those services on the cloud, you are basically selling yourself short. You can do so much more. And then the other point is that why don't you want to, or would you want to kind of reinvent the wheel and re-implement things that were already implemented before? Because I personally don't. I know that there is a lot of people around the world that actually are much smarter than me that have already solved that problem, So I would rather concentrate on my business logic. And then again, like, more code you write, more bugs you are going to make. So like less code is better, And then another, like for me personally, another fascinating aspect about serverless and like serverless or services, like, for example, API Gateway or DynamoDB or even Lambda, they have all been built with scale in mind. So they have been built for heavy load. And the thing is that they perform better with heavy load. So more the load is on the services, the better the performance gets, which is kind of counterintuitive. It shouldn't work like that, but then it does. And especially, again, when you come from traditional background and like on-prem services, servers and databases, where if you load your database too much, it just crashes and things like that. And then DynamoDB, on the other hand, it just works faster and that kind of things. And the fact that they are constantly improving. So the cloud providers are actually improving the services behind the scenes, and you don't even know about it. You don't need to kind of lift your finger basically to do anything. And then one day you just wake up and you have software that runs so much faster because, for example, AWS rolled out a new update. I have personally seen those cases, which are always kind of, you don't need to do anything and things just get better. While usually with the software, things just get worse from the moment that you deploy your software. You constantly need to kind of apply that extra energy and extra time to keep the things at least on the same level. And if you want to improve, that amount of effort just goes so much kind of higher. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, kind of, if you try to be cloud agnostic, so not to lock yourself on one cloud and kind of to have that potential to switch on the other to the other cloud if that need arises, it takes much more from you than it actually gives you. And if you, for example, developing software, and in the beginning, you always make certain choices like, what language are you going to use? What framework are you going to use, right? And mm-hmm. you are locking yourself in with those choices. You know, you don't make those choices with the thought in mind that, yeah, a few years like kind of down the road, I will just lift and shift my application to another language or another framework. The decision is not based on that thought, and that rarely happens. And I would argue that with the cloud, it also happens very rarely. And maybe kind of the most cases are such that the software will never be moved, from one cloud to the other. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a premature optimization of sorts, that you think that maybe one day you're going to move somewhere. That's why you are not going to use all these great opportunities that you have here. So kind of, in a way, it's you can think it's a legacy kind of thinking, this cloud agnosticity, because like, the underlying technology and the world around us has evolved so much, and we are still in the mindset that any day now we might need to move our software from one data center to the other, that kind of mindset, which I think doesn't necessarily work nowadays anymore. And maybe like just to finalize the thoughts, yeah, I'm totally for vendor locking and for going all in with one cloud, because I think it gives you, as I said, so much more than it takes from you. But then, of course, I don't believe in silver bullets, in any case. And there will always probably be situations when you need to stay on-prem, for example, and that's completely fine. Or you actually need to have a solution that works on different clouds for some reasons, and that's also completely fine. Or then you use different clouds in your solution. So it's always kind of a choice, like with any choice in software, you kind of consider risks versus benefits and what you get and what you gain and what you lose by the end of the day. So that's at least my perspective on this discussion.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I really enjoy it. And I think that you touch really, really important topics, I will say. But of course, one thing I just want to mention is that it really depends on the use case, on the
Sure.
company, on the organization, on the moment of the company, and there are so it's not just an easy answer. Yeah, I go for this and that's it. No, it's really, really difficult, and sometimes even the decision is not taken on let's say on an IT level. It's taken on a business level. So that makes the each let's say company different, taking different reasons to take a decision. But what I see is that the cloud has come to stay and will not go, and that having cloud skills are at the moment very, very not only demanded but also required, I will say. And in order to stay in the IT industry as a, let's say, developer, infrastructure, or whatever, you need to have at least the fundamentals of the cloud. You need to understand how scalability works. You need to understand at least the basics of the cloud. And well, I mean, that's my opinion. Do you share this opinion, or do you think no, you need that? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just kind of few days ago, I got asked by a non-technical person who wants to get more into tech. So what should he kind of start with, and what should he study? And pretty much the first answer was the cloud. And I completely agree with you. I don't think that cloud is going anywhere anytime soon, at least. And I would personally start with one of the market leaders like AWS or Azure, maybe Google Cloud, maybe Alibaba Cloud, but just pick one and concentrate on one and study it in depth. Because I think like with programming languages, understanding one programming language in depth kind of helps you to learn the new ones so much easier. And here it's the same, pretty much learning the principles and ideas behind one cloud. It will just give you the ability, if you need to learn other clouds as well. But I would concentrate on one cloud in the beginning. And as you were saying, I think it's pretty much a standard skill already, actually, based on my experience with interviews and candidates. You are required to have at least like a very basic understanding of how cloud works, because like DevOps and you build it, you run it kind of mentality has been very strong lately, and it's getting more and more stronger. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you definitely have to have at least basic understanding of how cloud works. And kind of first and foremost, it's a lot of fun. Actually, I think you're missing out if you are not learning cloud. But maybe kind of taking one step back from the cloud and technology discussion, I often like to quote my dad, who told me back when I was in the university, when I was complaining about all these math courses that I had to take. He was saying that the most important skill that the university will teach you is the skill to learn. So, and shout out to my dad, who is at age 82, is still doing active research in physics. But learning skills, in my opinion, is really the crucial skill for the IT professional, and kind of desire to learn and ability to learn fast. And of course, the more you learn, more there is to learn, the more you realize that the more there is to learn. And if you add to that some professional curiosity and being ready to change your mind, which is actually very tricky, especially if you're a seasoned professional, and kind of not getting stuck with this one idea or one thing that you learned maybe 10 years ago and that worked for you all this time, but then kind of questioning that, is it still the best way forward, or are there better ways? It's actually a very difficult skill to attain. And I think it's very, very important, because things are changing so fast. Oh, so yeah. I think, like, in a nutshell, you first and foremost need the learning skills, which would include some kind of healthy skepticism towards your own skills and ideas, and then some professional curiosity to kind of expand your field. And I think those are so much more important than any particular tech or any particular cloud. And those were actually the things that will get you forward and evolving.
Wow, you summarize it really, really good. Difficult to answer all the topics that you open, because they are so interesting and so important, in my opinion. You mentioned it very, very good, that the world is changing, and the cloud is changing the world also very, very fast. I just read that only last year, kind of AWS launched or released kind of 400 or 500 releases. Like,
yeah, it's insane. If you follow, for example, like the re:Invent conference that happens in the end of each year, so November, December, like the amount of new things that come out, like this year it was 2 or actually 3 weeks span. Usually it's just 1 week or like 4 to 5 days. The amount of new things that came out in those 2 weeks and prior to those 2 weeks are just like, it takes like days to just go through all those new features, and all this. Things are just changing so quickly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. But anyways, well, I contacted you because I see that you are very active in social networks, also kind of being part of this kind of podcasts and discussions. And I also saw that you are, as you already mentioned, AWS Community Builder. And I see how passionate you are about these kind of topics. And also that you like to share and invest your time on sharing, which I really, really appreciate. And kind of share that with you. Just share with us, why did you do that? When did you start it? Yeah.
Right. So actually, like to start with, I think one of the greatest advantages that AWS has is that the community that is kind of using AWS and sharing all the knowledge, because there are so many brilliant people around it, and there's so many open source projects and blog posts, like excellent talks and videos and podcasts and all that information. People are sharing it like for free without getting any money paid, because they are passionate about what they are doing. And I think that's one of the greatest assets that AWS has at the moment. That's my personal opinion. But like for me, when I started like this few years back, like 5-6 years back, I tried to get as much information as I possibly could in the beginning. And I started to attend the local meetup groups, of course, from the start, and reading all the blog posts and things on that subject. And then somehow like 2-3 years ago, I got asked to talk about my personal kind of work that I do with my customer at one of the local meetups. And then it pretty much got out of hand from there. And once I got to be active, I realized I actually enjoyed quite a lot. I never stopped. So I have really enjoyed like sharing what I have personally learned, because that's what I do nowadays. I only talk about the things that I have experienced myself. And I do it in the forms of conference talks or blog posts, now podcasts as well. Sometimes maybe like smaller things like Twitter or Twitter posts or LinkedIn posts. And I basically try to kind of help others learn the things that I had to learn maybe hard way. So I try to make it easier for other people. And though it is pretty hard work, and the work that you do in addition to your full-time job that you have as a developer, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy. But I think you would agree with me that you also gain yourself a lot from that. So you get a lot from that effort that you put into it. And for example, you learn immensely from trying to explain something to other people, or to research a topic in so much more details that you probably would otherwise, because you need to understand it inside out before you try to explain it to somebody else. And then you get questions and get into dialogues with people, and then you get completely different perspectives about the things that you are working on. So it's very, very beneficial personally to me. And there is this saying that if you want to learn something, you read about it. If you want to understand something, you write about it. And then if you want to master something, you actually go and teach that. So I guess that's my stage now. I try to master things through teaching and helping others. And yeah, it's been fun so far.
Yeah, and you can be proud of that, because you are doing well. You are doing very, very good. And just continue like this.
We'll try my best.
Yeah. Well, we are almost about to finish the podcast. Just the last two questions. The first of all, of all the questions is related to one of the latest things that you learn about cloud. It can be, I don't know, technical topic, strategy, a tool, whatever you want to share.
Right. So I think once again, AWS came up with something new just recently, and it's called S3 Object Lambda. And I haven't actually tried it myself yet. I'm very eager to, because it sounds like it can provide a lot of new fun use cases. But what it does is basically you can process your data that you retrieve from S3 before you return it to your application. So your S3 GET request kind of get intercepted with the Lambda function. So you can create, for example, multiple views of the same data set depending on different requirements, basically. Or you can filter out some personal information from the data before returning it, and this kind of thing. So like the possibilities are endless. So it's just a matter of imagination at this point. So I really want to try that out. So that's probably like one specific thing that I learned lately. And then I actually was doing this data analytics specialty certification on AWS recently, and it takes a lot of learning. So it takes a lot of time. but I have learned from it a fair share as well. So that's a huge chunk of new information that I have now.
And did you already sit the exam, or you
I had it two weeks ago, I think. Yeah,
oh.
Time flies. So yeah, I passed it. So now I'm once again certified.
Yay.
Yay.
Cool. Really interesting topic. I will have to take a look into that new feature.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun. It sounds fun.
Didn't hear about it before, but the possibilities that this open are
exactly
are very cool. All right, and the last question: which sources do you use to keep yourself up to date? I can imagine you use the official blogs and maybe also documentation. Anything else?
Yeah, documentation is mostly what you use when you actually start implementing something. So yeah, but in general, kind of to get up to date. Well, as I said several times, I'm into serverless, and I think the best resource for the news on serverless is Jeremy Daly's newsletter of by none. So I highly recommend that. You get all the serverless news not only from AWS but from all the cloud providers. And also his podcast, the Serverless Chats, is great. I listen to that. And from the podcasts, also the Real World Serverless by Jens Wei is a great podcast. So those are the things that I listen to and look for. And then I personally watch a lot of reinvent videos because the content is great. And the problem is there are just so many of them. There is like thousands and thousands of those videos. So yeah. I try to create sort of playlists of the videos that I enjoyed the most, so I can kind of return to them and maybe share with others. So, but reinvent videos are usually a great source of information. And from the documentation, actually, there's one specific part which is called Amazon Builders Library. And it's basically a collection of articles about Amazon's own best practices that they learned along the way while they were developing AWS. And you might imagine they have learned quite a bit through that process. So it contains very in-depth and very technical articles, and I find them very valuable. I've learned tons from that, so I can highly recommend that. Then there is this YouTube channel by Marcia Villalba, who is a developer advocate for AWS here in Nordics. It's called Fubar Serverless, if I'm not mistaken. And she has lots of awesome content with tutorials and hands-on things about pretty much on any service in AWS, I think, by now. So that you can check out. There's a lot of useful stuff if you want to get started with some new service, for example. She will explain how to do that. And yeah, as I mentioned already, I have been learning from my journey on the cloud started from learning for a certification. And I still believe that it's a very valid way, though I know there's a lot of different opinions about that. Like many people think that the certification is like vain and you don't really need it and so on and so forth. For me personally, I find it very useful, and I do it basically for myself. Nobody asks me to do the certifications, but it kind of gives me that extra boost and extra motivation and like specific timelines and specific agenda that I want to study, some kind of like an exam at the university, for example. So like to learn more about the services, which maybe I don't use in day-to-day basis because it's impossible to use all the services every day. So it gives me that kind of extra motivation to look into them and to know what to look for. So that's, I really highly recommend to anybody. Well, things that I can't maybe recommend, but the way that I have learned the best is through doing my day-to-day job. So like hands-on things for me and like trying to learn all the problematic cases and not only, the happy path, hello world cases, and to think about what can go wrong and how the services can fail and so on. That has given me the most really in terms of learning. So maybe I don't recommend you my job per se, but I recommend you to work from kind of hands-on experience, because that's really the best you can get.
Yeah, definitely. I also share your opinion with the certifications. They help me to have a goal, to have an agenda, and to have a kind of a focus.
Exactly.
So where I just spend my free time on a very clear goal, so I know where to go, and that motivates me at most.
Yeah, so, exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps me also. Yeah, and I have good news for you because Jeremy Daly and Marcia Villalba both were at this podcast. So in case you want to know them more from a personal perspective than from a technical perspective that we all already know, you can check it out later.
Great, I will for sure. Thanks.
Cool. So that was it basically. Thank you very much for your time, for participating, for sharing all your experience, all your ideas, all your opinions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I will leave all your social networks in the description in case anyone wants to contact you.
Sure.
And that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you in the next podcast.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.